At these brothers, men, knowledge without practice is pointless. You know what I'm saying? Knowledge without practice is pointless. And the direction I want to take this conversation, man, is, when you look around the world, we become a people that can speak to a certain thing, but I don't think as many people are walking in that thing as they think. And to narrow the conversation down, like, we can speak to spirituality. You know what I'm saying? We can speak to that world, but a lot of us aren't putting it into practice. We can speak about the prophets. We can tell you about what the messenger did. We can talk about Job. We can talk about faith without works is dead. We can talk about prayer without ceasing is the answer to all things. You know what I'm saying? We can talk about all these things, but not a lot of people can sit down and have a conversation and say, you know what? This is what I was going through. This is when I took this knowledge and applied it, and this is how I came out the other side. There are a lot of people that can have those conversations all day long, because most of our lives are spent just talking about a thing and having knowledge. We can go through all the traditions. We can have the what's that called when you pass around the bread and the Gatorade at church. We can have those type ceremonies. We can do the mass and eat the crackers and put water over our heads. We can do all these things. We can travel to Mecca. We can be baptized. We can do all these religious things, man. Like we have traditions down packed. Oh, we aren't going to miss a tradition. Fifth Sunday, everybody wear white and let's do it. Oh, we're not going to miss that. But when it comes to us walking out into the community, man, and sharing how these traditions have played a part, or sharing how this knowledge we've obtained has changed our lives, brother, it's crickets. It's crickets a lot. Like, we've become a world of half-truthers, man. And I'm telling you, knowledge without practice is pointless. Knowledge without practice is not only pointless for yourself, but pointless for those that are around you observing you. Knowledge without practice, like there are very few people that can just sit there and I'm talking about over 30 years old, over 40 years old, over 60 years old, and can give you just 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 accounts where they had to walk on water and had to stand on something. And if they wouldn't have stood on it, and if God wouldn't have been God, they would have fell to the bottom. A lot of people can't speak to that, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like this. Like, imagine a doctor, right? Imagine a doctor going to school. They got to go to school by 20 years. Imagine a doctor going to school for 20 years. He or she is doing all these seminars. They get all these doctorate and medical degrees. And they leave college, leave that stage, and just go down to the juke joint, or go down to the washateria, or go down to the barbershop, and for the next 20 years talk about medical procedures. Talk about how the body can heal itself. Talk about how certain herbs and maybe certain meds can make the body do a certain thing. They just talked about it. At some point, somebody's going to say, hey, doc, like this is good information, man, but share something with me. Share something with me where you saw a cancer turned around, or you saw some diabetes healed, or you share something with me, man. Share some stories with me. Share some experience with me. And he said, nah, bro, I just got the knowledge. You be like, well, doc, this is dang near pointless to me, man. That's why when a doctor, gets out of school and they go into the workforce, they call it practice. That's why a doctor That's why a doctor is said to practice. In other words, he's saying, hey, you know what? I've gone to school. I've done all these things, but now I'm about that life. Like I'm living in the trenches. If I said that XYD is this, and I'm proving this every day, I'm practicing it. And I'm telling you, your knowledge without practice is pointless. It's pointless. So we got to get to the point, man, where we're practicing what we preach, how they say. You know what I'm saying? I can remember, and as I'm saying all this, brother, y'all know I'm gonna point to myself first. I can remember, man, when I was 40, and I talk about this all the time, but this, I'm just gonna say it like this. I can remember when I was 40, and I can say this: when I was 40, I can say that I had an idea of how life worked. I had a general idea, and I'm not talking about just traditional thinking. I at 40 years old, I was completely out of the box. I was in my own world. I tapped into knowledge. So I had an idea of how life worked. But if I'm honest with myself and I'm honest with my brothers, I was still a half-truther. I was still a half-truth at 40 years old. With all the books I read, all the experiences, I was still consider myself a half-truther, which means I was talking more than I was practicing. Oh, we could sit down and have a cup of coffee, man, and talk, have God talk to the cows come home. And yeah, I went through a few things, and but I wasn't really standing on it like I thought I was. I wasn't really standing on it, man. And when I say standing on it, this is what what I really mean. Like, it's not that a lot of us don't know, and it's not that a lot of us don't put the work in to prove ourselves that we have that knowledge. But what a lot of us do is we'll only live, I'll say it like this, we'll only go to the edge. Right? We'll only go to the edge of the light that the world shows us. Y'all hear me out, man. We'll only go to the edge of the light that the world shows us. In other words, what I'm saying is, in other words, when the world is saying, hey, this is how you should live. This is the grand scheme of life right here, brothers. Go to school and get the degrees and get the job and play the game like this. Like you can play the game like that and call it successful. And I'll be honest, man, when I was 40, bro, I would consider myself successful. What I had achieved, what I had, the things I accumulated, the place I live, I would consider myself successful. But at some point in time, man, I stood on the edge of that success. I stood on the edge of the light that the world showed me, man, and I could see off into the dark. You know what I'm saying? And even though I couldn't see but a few feet off into that darkness, I knew there was something out there that I wasn't supposed to know. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, if the world is this big, if I understand God is this powerful, if I understand I was made in the image of that creator, and I see the light that the world is shining on me. I see where they're pointing the flashlight. But what's out there? What's on the next 40 acres? What's on the next 80 acres? What's on the next 2,000 miles out there in the darkness? And I'm gonna tell you, man, once I began to crave to know what was on the outside of that darkness, man, I really understood at that point. I really understood that even though I was quote unquote successful, I still wasn't fulfilled because I wasn't moving in an energy to practice on my own. If that makes sense. In other words, going back to the doctor scenario, if I'm a doctor and I graduate and I get on at General Hospital and I'm working there for 5-10 years and I'm successful and I got my pictures on the wall and I got the trophies and I done had a few open heart surgeries and I done healed some people, life is good. but I'm still under the jurisdiction. I really can't expand like I want to unless I start my own practice. So if I'm a doctor and I start my own practice, now I can go outside of the realms of what they taught me. Or they taught me it was all about prescribing meds. They told me it was all about prescribing chemo. But now that I'm practicing by myself and I got to stand on my own, I can tap into everything. Are you telling me these trees and leaves can heal people? Oh, they wouldn't let me talk about that back there. So now I got to move different, but now I got to stand on my own 10. Now I'm fulfilled because now I'm practicing what I preach. I'm not practicing what they told me to preach. I'm practicing what I preach. You know what I'm saying? Through my practice, through my experience. Fulfillment is on 10, man. Fulfillment is on 10. So at some point you got to ask yourself, like, what's out there? Like, what's out there? Because right now, let's say we're all successful in our own right, whatever that is, right? Let's say we've all accomplished the goals that mom and daddy set for us. That grandmama and granddaddy then did, prayed for us when they couldn't do a certain thing, but they hoped we could get to a certain life. 9 times out of 10, we found ourselves in that position. But now it's time to look beyond the light, man. Because the light that you see right now is just the light of the world. It's just the light of the world. It's not the Creator's light. Because the Creator's light is within the darkness. The Creator's light is within the unknown, man. Like when you cross that gun line and that fear kicks in, now you're beginning to walk with God. You're beginning to walk with God. And I can tell you this, man. I can tell you this based on experience. Not saying the soul knows it all, because if I live to be 1,000 years old, man, I still have only scratched the surface of barely knowing something. All of us. But I can tell you this. I can tell you one thing about crossing that gun line. First off, let me say this, man. Make sure y'all check the link out in the description box. We're having the revival. The revival is going to be July the 29th through July the 31st. It's going to be a 3-day event. Three separate calls. Private YouTube event. On the 29th, 30th, and 31st, man, where we're going to be talking about going into the unknown. And so we're going to be talking about this. You know what I'm saying? And I wouldn't get on Zuckerberg's World Wide Web if I didn't feel like I had something to show y'all, tell y'all brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? So check that out, man, and I hope to see y'all there. But I can tell you what's going to happen on the other side of that darkness. The first thing that's going to happen when you cross that gun line, the first thing that's going to happen when you look back at all the naysayers, all the people that are saying, hey, no, it's not safe out there. Don't go. Stay here with us. Like, don't you like this level of success that the world gave us? Once you cross that gun line, what you're going to quickly realize, or what's going to happen, is you're going to be stripped. You're going to be stripped. You're going to be stripped of everything you know, that you've learned. You're going to be stripped of everything that the world taught you, because you have to go back to ground zero to let God, put you in the right position. It's kind of like when Bruce Lee said, it might have been Coke and water. He said, hey, you know what? I'm trying to give you water, but you're Coke, or something like that. He said, but you can't hear what I'm trying to tell you, because you full of all this Coke. Like, you got to get rid of that so I can tell you what you need to know. So you got to understand this. When you cross that gun line, you may think that you're about to be frolicking through a bed of roses and calla lilies. You may think that it's finna all be good, but before it all gets good, you got to be stripped. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying you got to hit the bottom, but I'm saying I'm saying God will take everything from you. Energetic. He'll put you in a position to learn something new. I'm not trying to make that sound bad, but I'll say this. One good thing about voluntarily walking into that darkness is a lot of times you don't have to hit the bottom, because a lot of times when you're asking for a certain knowledge, but you aren't moving in an energy to obtain that knowledge, then God will say, okay, you know what? You've been asking me this thing for 5 years. but you're not practicing it. So I gotta take you to the bottom to force you to get rid of everything you know, right? So long story short, when you cross that gun line, you'll be stripped of that stuff, right? Meaning you have to relearn every single thing you know, every single thing you thought you knew. Why you did certain things, why you celebrated certain holidays, why you prayed a certain way, why you paid a certain percent to do a certain thing, why this, why you question everything. And some of that stuff will stick. Some of that stuff will make sense, and you just be able to put it in a place that makes sense. But some of that stuff you'll say, hey, you know what? That's not the light of God. That's the light of the world. You'll be stripped. You'll be stripped of why you liked a certain caliber of people. You'll be stripped of why you like entertaining certain venues, why you entertain certain. You'll be stripped of all that stuff, man. You'll be stripped of what you call God. You'll be stripped of what you call love. You'll be stripped of what you call forgiveness, right? But I'm going to tell you this. On the back end of being stripped of all that, man, you'll be renewed. You'll be made new. You'll be born again. Let's say it like that. I know y'all can identify with that. You'll be born again. Which means now you'll have a completely different identity. You'll be a different person. You'll see the world different. Because now you're amongst those very few that had the gonads to cross the gun line. You had to go. You got to understand what I'm saying. You can be in a room full of 100 people. And if in that room, y'all are at a convention, in that room, they are serving hors d'oeuvres and fine champagnes and all this stuff, and it's nice and it's fancy and it's all this. And they say, hey man, this is good living. We've won. But if they open up this door, right? And in this door, you can't see nothing but darkness. And they say, hey, you know what? If you really want to experience the convention, go through there. If you really want to know what life is about, go through that door. Ain't about 1 or 2 of y'all going through it. 3 or 4 at most going through that door. Say, you know what? Hey, this is fun. But hey, man, I want to see what's on the other side of that door. If they say, hey, on the other side of that door is where the CEO is. Yeah, you with all the VPs and stuff. You with all the high level managers in the function, but the CEO, oh, he's in that dark room. Most people gonna say, hey, you know what? I'll stick here with what I got. But some people are gonna say, you know what? Nah, I want to talk to the big boss. I want to talk to Bezos. Huh? Some people say, I want the knowledge of, I want to know how he runs this thing. I don't want to just sit here and get a fat salary and be able to party amongst my comrades. I want to sit amongst the CEO of this thing, man, and get as much information that I can. So that when I come back to work, when I start putting the work back in at work, I understand the nuts and bolts of how this thing is working. So if I understand the nuts and bolts of how this game is working, don't you think I'll move different? So you got to understand, man, you got to go through that door, man. You're going to be stripped and then you're going to be renewed, man. You know what I'm saying? And I can remember this. I can remember, like I said, when I was 40 years old, I was still consider myself to be a half-truther at 44 years old. But I'm going to tell you this. By the time, how's it going today? By the time I was 44, so you talking about in the frame of 4 years, I didn't even recognize myself. Not only had my identity changed, everything about me changed. I understood my power. I understood my direction. I understood what I wanted to do. I had talked to the CEO of life. I had gone into the darkness, man. I had traveled into the unknown, man. And the Bezos that created this world, man, gave me the one-on-one. And I'm gonna tell you this, by 44, I was in control of my life. In 44, I was quarterback. Huh? I went from special teams. Yeah, life was good. I'm on the team. I'm successful. Yeah, I got a jersey. I went from being on special teams to quarterback. I was quarterback in my own life, man. You know what I'm saying? And really, when I say I was quarterback in my own life, this is all I'm really saying. I was 100% sure that I was in charge, and I had taken 100% accountability of every single thing that was taken on in my life. That's why I was quarterback. That's why I was quarterback. I had taken on 100%. Ain't spiders there. I had taken on 100% accountability and ownership of my life. Not only that, I was practicing. That's the main thing. I went from just talking about a thing to practicing a thing. You know what I'm saying? So when I said, hey, you know what? I want my life to be different. I want to do X, Y, Z. Instead of me just sitting there talking about it, instead of me just sitting with my partner saying, hey, you know what? One day I'm going to do this. I started doing it. I started grabbing my camera and making content. I started seeking the freedom that I desired. You know what I'm saying? And I was able to call my shots simply because I was practicing it, man. That's what I'm saying. Knowledge without practicing is pointless. Knowledge without practicing is pointless, man. You gotta think about all the things you know, all the books you've read. You gotta think about all the conversations you've had with your parents and grandparents and uncles and mentors. What would happen if you just took that information and instead of just putting it in a quote on Instagram, instead of just using that knowledge to share with your brothers and sisters when they come to you in a time of need, you took all that information and you woke up and you walked in it. Man, life would change overnight. Overnight. You gotta understand this too. You gotta understand. You gotta understand this. Once you go into that darkness, once you go into that unknown, and once you find out what's over there, and once you come back, it's going to be very hard, almost impossible for you to conform like the people that were in the convention before you left. In other words, once you go in that dark room and talk to the CEO, he's giving you the nuts and bolts of the operation. Once you come back into the room with all the tuxedos and the caviar and the wine and champagne, you won't even look at them different. Not that you'll look down upon them, but you see the world different. You see the company different now. It's like, yeah, you could recite the company mission 5 minutes ago, but now you understand where the company is going. You understand the company's direction, and you understand your role in it. You understand how you're supposed to be putting in work to make this company better, i.e. make this world better. Y'all get what I'm saying? Y'all understand the parallel. And you become a free thinker for the company. I'm going to say this, man. I don't care what company it is. I don't care what industry it is. The most beneficial person to a company is the one that seems to kind of go against the grain. Like, you can bring everybody in there, and y'all, some of y'all, you be in those corporate meetings, and y'all been in them. They so goddamn fake. They so goddamn kiss ass. Oh, hey, this is how we supposed to look. This is how we supposed to dress. This is how we're supposed to talk. This is the jargon we're supposed to use. I hate that. I couldn't stand that. The person that's the most benefit to the company is the person that looks at that and says, you know what? I'm not playing that game. But you know what? I value this company and I want to see it do better. So I'm going to think outside the box. I'm going to start voicing my opinion on things that I don't think are right so we can move to be better. Instead of just following in suit trying to be here for 30 or 40 years. It's a different mentality. So what I'm saying is, once you go into that darkness and you talk to God and you come back, you're going to see the world different. You no longer want to fit in. Yeah, you want to see world peace and happiness like everybody else, but you're gonna acquire that different. You're gonna help your fellow employees. You're gonna help your brothers and sisters slightly different now because you've talked to the boss. You see the grand agenda of what's going on, man. And you're gonna move different, brother. And I'm gonna tell you this: when you do that, man, you're gonna become your own governor. You're gonna establish, like I'm always saying, like the book says, you're gonna establish your own truth. In other words, the CEO is gonna say, all right, well, once you leave this room and you go back into the convention, everybody else is governed by the what they call the things at the job. You know, this the I can't think what they just call them at a job, like different practices and procedures and all that kind of stuff. Like you're no longer governed by that. Since you've talked to me, the big boss, the CEO, since you've talked to God, I'm giving you the authority to go out there and form your own truth. You see the company like I see it now. So you don't have to fit in this little box to make sure you're governed. You can govern yourself. Go out there and bless the company, my son. That's what's taking place, man. So it's imperative you go into the darkness, man. So if there are any takeaways that I want y'all to take away from this video, first, make sure you click the link in the description box or in the first comment in the chat and check out the information on the revival. God lives in the unknown. Check that out. But the takeaways are, you got to ask yourself, you have to ask yourself if you're afraid of the dark. First, you got to ask yourself if you're afraid of the unknown. You got to ask yourself, like, are you aware that you see the level of success that you've accomplished, that the world has prescribed to you? But do you see that realm outside of that darkness? Do you see those things that you think about, but you dare not speak of? You know, it's kind of like that movie. I get the movies mixed up, like Hunger Games and Divergent, all them type movies. That's really out. They're really. This is what they're telling you. They're saying the world is made up of factions and all this kind of stuff. But on the outside of these walls, let's not speak of that. But there's a whole nother world out there. But we can't speak of that. Let's not even entertain the fact of crossing these lines. All those movies are talking about that. So ask yourself, are you scared to cross the gun line? Is what I'm really saying. Are you afraid of the dark? Huh? And then ask yourself this. Ask yourself this. If you continue to live your life and you live to be 100 years old and you clock out, would people be able to put your life story in the Bible next to the characters that you read about? Huh? What I'm asking is, are you practicing? That's what I'm really asking. I'm saying, I know you have the knowledge, but are you practicing? Will they be able to take your biography? Will they be able to take your journal and just insert it in a 2.0 version of the Bible? Do you think you're living in a manner? Do you think you're living in a manner of the people you look up to on the spiritual level? The Jobs, the Moseses, the Abrahams, the messenger himself. Do you think you're moving in a fashion to fit that bill? And if not, why? If that's going to be your go-to manual for life, if you wake up every single day and you're reading your Bible or you're going to a service where the message is coming from the Bible, don't you think at some point it should be your playbook? At some point it should be your playbook. At some point you should be able to sit with your sons, your daughters, your nieces, your nephews, the people in the community as an old man in a long gray beard and speak about your life on biblical proportions. Speak about the time you had to walk on water. Speak about the time you had to heal yourself. Speak about the time you had no money, but you had to manifest that rent money out of thin air and what you did. Speak about how you crossed that gun line and went into the unknown, man. That's all I'm saying, brothers. Knowledge without practice, brothers, is pointless.